As the reality of Snow White's box office failure sets in, seems like the media has grown a pair. It's about damn time, right? Welcome to the Box Office Revival. I'm Brandon Gray, creator of Box Office Mojo, coming at you with this story on Variety, inside Disney's Snow White fiasco. But first, let's get a box office update on Snow White. So here are the Tuesday numbers, and look, Snow White made $4 million on Tuesday. It was up 59% over Monday for a running tally of $48.7 million. Of course, Tuesday, famously here in America, that's Discount Tuesday. So you'll see a big bump for all movies in the market. People looking for cheaper ticket prices. So 59% bump for Snow White on Tuesday. It's not a good sign. It's not a bad sign. It's just to be expected. I mean, look at the other numbers here. Black Bag up 60%, Novocaine 50% range. Let's look at another kid movie, Day the Earth Blew Up, 50%. And on down the line, pretty typical for Tuesday. And in fact, Snow White's Tuesday bump is similar to Dumbo's Tuesday bump back in March 2019. Dumbo being an apt comparison because, like Snow White, it's an adaptation of a classic Disney movie, and it was not well received. Also considered a big box office bust, maybe not quite as big as Snow White. Snow White is an all-timer after all, but Dumbo did about $115 million by the end of its run. So let's check out that Tuesday just to show you how the Tuesday bump is the similar. So here's the Tuesday. Dumbo did $4.7 million. It was up 63% versus Snow White, which was up 59%. So roughly 60% for each picture. And Dumbo had a $53.6 million running tally at that point. Now, if Snow White follows that same trajectory with its $48.7 million running tally, it's looking at a final domestic total of $104 million. Yikes. So, in other words, if Snow White continues to perform in a similar way as Dumbo, it'll barely cross the $100 million mark domestically. Ouch. Well, what about this weekend here, that second weekend? What do these weekday numbers portend? Well, Dumbo crashed pretty hard in its second weekend and only did $18 million in its second weekend. And if Snow White follows suit, Snow White is looking at, let me see, just doing the math here. Snow White, ouch. Snow White is looking at maybe a $15.3 million for its second weekend if it follows the Dumbo trajectory. Disaster. That would be a 60% drop. Anyway, back to this bombshell from Variety that published on March 25th. You know, it's funny that they waited until after the movie debuted and disappointed at the box office to unleash stories like this. This does not ring of journalistic integrity, if you ask me. I mean, when we're this late in the game, come on. But anyway, it recounts much of what you already know, especially if you've been on YouTube these past few years. Rachel Zegler's politically charged posts and her disparaging remarks against the 1937 Snow White. But one tidbit I found telling was this. I got to scroll down a bit here, was surrounding the Oscars. So it says here, and I'm quoting the story, Zegler had already strained nerves at both Disney and Steven Spielberg's Amblin partners when she complained on social media that she wasn't invited to the 22 Oscars as a star of Best Picture nominee West Side Story, which Disney distributed through Fox. Sources say she had just begun production on Snow White in London, and Sean Bailey, then president of Walt Disney Studios Motion Picture Production, declined to cut her loose for the telecast. After Zegler aired her grievances publicly, the Academy provided her with a ticket, even though she wasn't nominated. So she was supposed to be shooting Snow White. We didn't know this part at the time. We just thought the Academy snubbed her, or at least that's what the media led us to believe that the mean old Academy didn't invite the star of the Best Picture nominee. And so not only did her airing of this on social media get her a ticket, it also got her to present. So she got the whole Oscar experience when I guess she was supposed to be shooting Snow White in London. And by the way, the story does note that Bailey was gone from the job by February 2024. That's right. Sean Bailey, who is perhaps the source, or at least the leader of this push at Disney to make these live action remakes, left the company or was dismissed after the disappointment of The Little Mermaid and I guess the impending doom that was Snow White. The story also details Zegler's disdain for the results of the presidential election here. And one thing it fails to mention, I got to point this out, is that she posted her comment about the results, and the Snow White trailer was all set to debut in front of Wicked and Moana 2. And usually when a movie trailer debuts, it first appears on YouTube. But in this case, the Snow White trailer was a theatrical exclusive in front of Wicked and Moana 2. And we had to wait a few weeks to see it on YouTube, where, as you all know, it became the most downvoted, most ratioed movie trailer of all time, apparently. But that was perhaps directly stemming from the latest outburst from Zegler that finally prompted Disney to set her up with a social media guru to vet any posts before Snow White's March 21st bow. And speaking of that debut, in the next paragraph, Variety describes it as dismal. And that's quite telling. A trade, trades are effectively the press agents for the industry. For a trade to call the opening dismal, that's some strong language. They do quote the $87 million worldwide figure. Since then, it's been adjusted downward. When actual numbers came out, it was actually $86 million. But the point still stands. Whether it's 87, 86, still dismal for a movie like this. Story goes on to say, to put Snow White's global box office haul into perspective, it's about $34 million less than Joker Folie à Deux. And the budget was even bigger because Joker Folie à Deux reportedly had a $200 million budget, and the trades are at least admitting a $270 million budget for Snow White. I think perhaps the comparison ends there, certainly from a genre or an audience perspective. I mean, Snow White is a family movie. It's for little kids. Joker Folie à Deux is not a family movie. It's for comic book fans, drama fans, that sort of thing. Very R-rated situation, different kind of audience. But what is in common between Joker Folie à Deux and Snow White is the vitriol. I mean, people seem to hate both movies, and Joker Folie à Deux had a striking drop-off at the box office. I mean, very rarely do we see social media hate translate to such a steep decline at the box office. But it happened to Joker Folie à Deux. Check this out, Joker Folie à Deux. Look at the box office here. This is the weekend box office. Yeah, this first number includes preview grosses, but I'll let it slide for now. Look at that drop-off. $7 million in its second weekend. And the picture ultimately barely crossed the $200 million mark. Now, I think because Snow White is a family movie, it will probably hold up better than Joker Folie à Deux, which seemed to anger every fanboy of the first movie. Haven't seen anything quite like what happened to Joker Folie à Deux. But hey, will Snow White be the next one? We're about to find out. Second weekend is coming up. And the knives are sharpened. The story goes on to quote a rival studio executive in regards to Snow White, saying, "You can't say that a live-action remake of the most iconic film in the vault that cost $270 million and has been reshot multiple times, opening to $50 million is okay. The math does not work. That movie should be a billion-dollar movie." And this was when the picture was actually tracking higher, tracking to 45 to 55 million, when it ended up opening to 42 million for its first 4 days. Well, yes, the math does not work here, but I do take issue when they say that it should be $1 billion movie. Well, I guess if you're spending hundreds and millions of dollars to make it, yes, but Snow White was not $1 billion movie. Even if they had perfect execution, they didn't have all these reshoots, they didn't have this Rachel Zegler drama, I think it would be unlikely for Snow White to get to the $1 billion mark. What this story should be bringing up is perhaps The Little Mermaid. Now, there's a picture that should have been a $1 billion hit given the popularity of Ariel. Makes me wonder if stories like this are a bit of scapegoating, and who better to scapegoat than Rachel Zegler, the face of all your Snow White problems. But something else they point out here. They do quote Jeff Bach at Exhibitor Relations, who says they say all press is good press, but in Snow White's case, they were unabashedly wrong. Ooh, get that pun there. Anyway, too much negative controversy surrounded this film for years, and it didn't help that the reviews were subpar, likely rendering this latest live-action adventure to D+ for many potential ticket buyers. By the way, as an aside, that's another problem for movies and Disney movies. You're paying for Disney Plus already, might as well wait, right? So he says a possible saving grace, a feeble marketplace where Snow White could stay a while, as many family films have, despite the lackluster debut. Yes, well, pretty soon we're going to have spring break and Easter break. Snow White is well positioned, but as I mentioned earlier in this video, Dumbo was positioned in the same way, yet flamed out pretty quickly. So it really depends. What is the interest here? Is Snow White the kind of movie that people rush to turn out? Is the bad word of mouth so toxic that it's going to kill it like it killed Joker Folie à Deux? Again, like I said, we're just waiting for that second weekend. But getting back to this issue of scapegoating and the press, and what's the curious thing about this is that normally press is just press, but sometimes a perfect storm occurs where it seems like the bad press can kill a movie. I mean, look at Joker Folie à Deux and now Snow White. While I'm not aware of an actual measurement of exactly how bad press affected Joker or Snow White, these perfect storms seem to start with fundamentally flawed movies. Joker was a sequel that should never have been made, but since it was, its only chance of success was to literally be a Joker movie, which it was not. Snow White, as iconic and historically significant as it was, should never have been remade for a multitude of reasons, from the character's lack of popularity today, to the well being run dry by Snow White and the Huntsman and other similar movies, to the downward trajectory of Disney's live-action franchise. Oh, the story does mention the live-action problem here in this paragraph, in this list of other excuses for Snow White's demise here. They say that Disney live-action movies have been shakier in recent years, with the likes of Dumbo and Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. Yes, both of those pictures disappointed at the box office, but those were 2019. They also mentioned Peter Pan and Wendy on Disney Plus. There was also Pinocchio. You know, it's funny that they didn't mention more recent examples that were more impactful on Snow White, such as The Little Mermaid and Mufasa here. These were signs of weakness. Little Mermaid, that's the remake that should have been $1 billion movie, not Snow White. Yet it only made $570 million. Mufasa saved some face thanks to the holiday winter corridor, but it still made $900 million less than its 2019 predecessor. I mean, that is what I call shaky ground. You cannot spin those things as anything else but disappointments at the box office based on their predecessors. And they didn't do Snow White any favors, that's for sure. The bottom line, though, is that when the movie is weak, there's blood in the water. Throw in a powder keg like Rachel Zegler, And it's so easy for the negativity to snowball. It's so easy for that hate train to leave the station. So, what say you? Is the media finally doing its job, or is it cowardly jumping on the bandwagon? How much do you think this Rachel Zegler drama cost Snow White? And if you're looking for the objective perspective on the movies and the box office, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to the Box Office Revival. Thank you for watching.